Great to have you here. Let me just, if I might ask a couple of questions regarding I think there's some attention that's been already given this morning to the Ryan budget, but I guess I would ask General Walker, take away the feelings about the political feasibility and sort of the three-step test that you set up in terms of something that might work. Do you believe that it addresses the long-term debt crisis and really gets us where we need to be going in terms of sustainability?
I think it's politically courageous. I think that it involves a number of transformational type of changes, some of which are meritorious. I know there's been concerns that have been expressed about some of the assumptions underlying it, that I think have to be looked at. But those would be my preliminary thoughts.
Okay. Let me ask you all about the Class Act. The Class Act was a provision that was a part of the health care reform bill that passed last year. Even Secretary Sebelius has appeared in front of this committee and said it's totally unsustainable. That's what CBO has concluded, that will add significantly to deficits. And the Fiscal Commission actually recommended abolishing it or repealing it, which is I've got a bill that would do the very same thing. It strikes me at least that when you're in a hole, you should quit digging, and we're in a pretty deep hole. This is something that complicates, I think, the fiscal picture even more dramatically going forward. So tell me what your reaction is to, with regard to that legislation that passed as part of the health care reform bill, and how what we ought to be doing now to to get it off the books.
It's fiscally irresponsible, fundamentally unsustainable, and I think you ought to consider repealing it.
Anybody have a different reaction to that? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It was a long-term care piece of legislation, entitlement program that was added to the health care bill.
Yeah, well, I think that's the kind of mistake that was made with Medicare Part D. I mean, you need to have funding mechanisms for things like that. We should have done that with Medicare Part D, and I would say the same thing about this.
As I was leaving, I had to go do something else. It was something Dr. Foster was mentioning in reaction to a response to a question from Senator Schumer, had to do with sort of the moral equivalence of a dollar generated from revenue increases versus a dollar from spending cuts. And I would ask you just to maybe, if you could, to elaborate on that, because it strikes me at least that revenue increases, and if you look historically, throughout the last 40 or 50 years, we always run somewhere in that 18 to 19% of revenue, irrespective of what tax rates are. People find ways, they adjust their behavior in reaction to what whatever the tax rates are at the time. And I also believe that tax increases, of course, affect, I think, economic growth. So the question about how that bears on revenues, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that, because I'm not so sure when you were answering that question, you were saying a dollar of revenue increases or tax increases would be equivalent to a dollar of spending cuts in terms of arithmetically. But could you provide some context or a little texture to that would get more at the issue of how tax increases would bear on economic growth and therefore long-term revenue?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that opportunity. Arithmetically, $1 of tax increase does equal $1 of spending reduction, but the comparison breaks down from that point forward. It's a lot more than just the math. There's the economics, there's the politics, the concept of what is fair politically between conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats, and then there's the question that Senator Schumer was trying to sort of set aside, I think, which was the size of government. When the problem that we have before us is that government has grown dramatically and is expected to do so far more dramatically in the long run, as Dr. Blinders pointed out, the problem is, in fact, the spending side. So if that's where the problem is, not on the revenue side, because revenues will get back to their historical norm very quickly as the economy recovers, and in fact rise above the historical norm in the years that follow under current policy, the issue isn't a shortfall of revenues. The issue is an excess of spending, and if that's where the problem is, it strikes me as unfair to taxpayers, which are the real issue where it should be fair or not. It's unfair of taxpayers to ask them to pay more to solve a spending problem that Congress would otherwise have not solved.
Just a quick reaction, if I might. Admiral Mike Mullen, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has said in testimony in front of the Senate that The greatest threat to America's national security is our national debt. You probably heard that, which I think is a pretty stunning statement coming from your top military leader. But former chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Alan Greenspan, has said that he believes there's a 50% probability of a debt crisis in the next 2 to 3 years. Do you agree with that assessment?
I agree with both, and I've said it in 2007.
I don't agree with either, actually. I think there is some probability of a crisis in the near term. The signs are not that it's happening, and we're in some sense protected by you can't beat something with nothing principle. The people that would flee the dollar have to go somewhere else. So it could be, but I would certainly not handicap it at 50%. And I don't think it's the biggest threat to our national security. I wouldn't even attempt to decide which one was. If I got number 2 on Admiral Mullen's list, I'd probably just shake my head yes, that's right. I don't think it's the national debt.
I think we're momentarily seduced by a variety of conditions in the global system that are driving down interest rates and signaling to us that everything is okay, and we're being seduced by that. That is not going to last for long. When the crisis comes, no one knows. That it will come if we stay on our current path is a certainty.
Let me clarify, Senator. I don't believe that the current national debt, I believe that our fiscal irresponsibility is the greatest threat to America's future, which is the deficits and debt that lie ahead. That, I believe, is the #1 national security threat, not the current level of debt.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all very much.